Okay, let's begin. I am Lanice Antoine Shelley, and I'll be your host through constructive healing-based conversations designed to empower adoptees and the adoption curious. Through the lens of experts and lived experiences, we focus on alchemizing our stories into maximum social impact. These are the voices who could not speak when they were young. So have you ever been to the States?
I haven't, but I've got a trip planned in October to see one of my good friends who lives in New York. So I'm looking forward to it. It's
It's
gonna be
your
my
first
first time.
time.
Yes, I'm excited. Have you been to?
I have.
Yeah, what did you think?
I loved it actually. I studied abroad and spent a summer in Oxford, and
Oh,
it was gorgeous out there. And I just went ham because it was summer. You're with a bunch of Europeans and some
yeah,
Americans, and it's study abroad programs. No one behaves.
yeah. Oh, that's so lovely.
Yeah, I enjoyed being out there. I've only been to a few countries in the UK, but I intend to go back and spend more time because it's extraordinary being in the old world.
Mm-hmm.
And because America is the new world.
Yeah,
And when you go to countries where you're like, wow, this is like old world
yeah, really old.
architecture and dirt and thinking, and even the people look like they've been preserved. Like when I went to Senegal, you see
Yeah,
them walk by, you're like, wow, that's a
yeah.
preserved set of features.
Yeah, I love that. I love that way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Where else have you traveled?
So I've been back home to Jamaica, which was lovely. I plan to go back, definitely. Hopefully meet some birth family there. I've been to Tunisia, which was gorgeous. Absolutely loved it there. I used to live in France for a little while, for about 5 years in the north of France. So that was nice. That was definitely an experience, but it was nice. I had a very free childhood there. And then around Europe, Italy, Spain. Yeah.
Parlez-vous français?
Ouais, un peu.
Oh, you
What?
probably speak more than me. Let's not go any further because I haven't been practicing and my
Another
accent is
time.
atrocious. Yes.
Another
Yes.
time, another time.
So are you a domestic adoptee?
I am. I'm a domestic adoptee. I was adopted at the age of 4. Do you want me to tell you the story?
If you'd like to, you don't
Yeah.
have to.
Okay, so I'm a domestic adoptee. I was adopted at the age of 4. My birth mother suffered a range of trauma, which led her to abuse substances. And she had me, and then my adoptive parents, which were then my foster parents, came into the hospital and then fostered me for a while. So I was put on a plan, and they really did try to keep me together with my birth family, which is quite different to a lot of the things that we hear. So I would be with one family in the week and then one family at the weekend. And they tried to make it work like that. But unfortunately, my birth mum got quite unwell. So I was fostered by my adoptive family. So my adopted mum is Black Caribbean Jamaican, which is really interesting because that's also what I am. So I'm half Jamaican, half Montserratian. My adopted dad is white British. And so they were fostering with the aims of family preservation. So they would take kids basically for respite whilst their families got themselves together. And then with the idea of giving the parents a bit of a break, and then the children would go back. So I went to live with them for a while. And then it just, at the time, I had a social worker, and he was a Black man, and he was very honest with them. And he said, so basically in the area where I was brought up in the UK, it was a majority white area, especially at the time. So I was born in 1999, so especially at the time, majority white area. And he said, listen, if you don't adopt this child, she's going to go around the care system because no one around here wants to adopt a Black child. So that was the reality of it at the time. So they ummed and ahed because they were really for family preservation. They wanted me to go back with my birth family, but in the end, they decided to adopt me. So that was at the age of 4 that everything went through. And then, yeah, I've been with them for the rest of the time. I'm in reunion with my birth family. So I'm in reunion with my birth mum side of the family, which is really lovely, getting to know like cousins and getting to know my birth mum. And then I'm also in touch with my birth dad side of the family. And I've got 2 gorgeous little brothers who are so sweet. And I met a cousin actually the other day, and we're basically twins. She's my cousin, but I feel like she's my long lost sister. So I've got reunion on both ends, which I'm very privileged to have. Comes with its trials, comes with its ups and downs, but I'm in an okay place with
I am fascinated by your story.
it.
How incredible. You are the first adoptee that I've spoken to whose adoptive parents work to preserve their
Mm,
biological connections.
mm,
How does that feel? Like they fought to have you stay with your biological family, knowing that they did that. And the final recourse was to adopt you, but also give you space to reunify. How does
yeah.
that feel?
I feel privileged. I acknowledge my privilege and I feel privileged in that sense. And I feel it makes me feel loved and cared for because I feel like they understood adoption trauma before me. So they gave me a lot of space to feel that they weren't perfect by any means because they're humans who are living this life for the first time, like we all are. But it gave me the space to be able to feel less guilty about reunion with birth family. My adopted mum made a massive effort to put pictures of birth family around the house, which was so lovely. And it felt like I was always connected to my birth family. My adoptive mum would send them letters and pictures through letterbox contact, which is what we have in the UK. I'm not sure what it's like in the States, but we have a system called letterbox contact, which is quite flawed, but at the time that's what we had. And you could send a letter and the birth family could send a letter back. So I never got anything back, unfortunately. However, my adopted mum was really honest with me about everything. And I think that especially having the developmental trauma and the separation trauma that I went through, having someone with that honesty was really helpful. So yeah, I definitely see the privilege in it. And it meant that I was negotiating my trauma and acting out my trauma, but I had a safety net.
I am blown away by this. I'm completely gobsmacked. I want to speak to what you said about your adoptive parents,
Mm,
understanding trauma,
mm,
understanding your trauma.
mm,
And again, this is the first time I'm having this conversation with an adoptee who felt that, who
mm,
truly felt that from them. So therefore, you were able to connect it to love.
mm-hmm.
And a lot of adoptees, including myself, struggle with this idea of love. What is it?
Yeah.
Because I personally felt that I was a charity project.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a household of humanitarians who do a lot of projects and events and mission trips via the church. And I'm
Mm,
a product of missionaryism.
mm,
And therefore, a lot of things that I experienced as a child was felt through this sense of, oh, I'm a charity project like all of the other projects that you've had before. And that being the case, people could treat me however they wanted to
mm.
because I was within a better life,
Okay.
no
Mm,
matter how they treated me. It was better than in Haiti, it was better than with my biological family.
mm,
That was the subconscious messaging. that I'm still unraveling to this day. So to hear you say that they were locked into understanding your trauma is amazing to me. How do you think they came about understanding your trauma? What work did they do that allowed you to see that they truly saw your grief?
So I think that my adoptive parents are the type of people who don't follow the mold. So I think that in the UK, so I can only speak for the UK, we have this culture where everything is fine, everything is perfect, we all queue, we're all polite, everything is lovely. So a lot of the time, the major narrative of adoption here in the UK is similar to what you're talking about. You're lucky, you should be grateful, this is amazing. If I tell someone I'm adopted, oh, that's so lovely. Oh, you have too much. Oh, you have this, you have that. And questions about I've had questions, would you rather have stayed in an orphanage? And I've never been in an orphanage. So there's those massive assumptions, nonsensical assumptions. And so I think that my adoptive parents could see through that and could see that no child should be separated from their birth family. They should, if they are separated, maybe people could look into kinship care. So I think it felt like a common sense thing, because people who aren't adopted, that don't understand, if they were to be separated from their family, uprooted, and then plonked into a completely different environment, they would understand that it has massive, massive negative effects. So I think that. And then also, I vaguely remember my adoptive mum saying that when she was in school, so she was born in the 60s, but when she was in school, she did a tiny module on psychology and child development. And so, just the basics of it, the basics of attachment theory, the basics of children and their caregivers. And it just made sense. So, I think it was the fact that they don't follow the crowd and they have that common sense, which I think everyone should, because it just makes sense that adoption is trauma.
I want to pull a thread that I think exists here as well.
Mm.
You said that your adoptive parents are Black, correct?
So my adoptive mom is Black and my adoptive dad is white.
Okay.
Mm.
I think your adoptive mom being Black
Mhm.
opens up the possibility for empathy a little bit wider
Yeah,
in this case than if she was white.
I agree.
And I'm definitely going to go there because
Mm.
as a Caribbean, as someone who we're just inherently marginalized, we
Mm.
have our struggles as Black people
Mm.
because we exist. And when you grow up understanding the deeper layers of a struggle because you exist, not because you're poor, not
Mhm.
because you're of a certain shape or any kind of other external things. It's
Mm.
because of the color of your skin. You understand and can identify grief in a different way because you've seen different layers of it as a person of color. That's just from my point of view, from what I'm hearing, which possibly I don't know her from Adam, but for me, I do move through the world differently. I have a different sensibility than my white counterparts.
Yeah.
My white friends will move into spaces differently than I do.
Mm.
And adding on the layer of adoption, which is just drenched in grief that a lot of people don't like to even acknowledge.
Mm.
It's just fascinating and extraordinary to me that she identified that from the jump. And I'm not saying that there aren't white people that can identify grief. There aren't white people or non-BIPOC people that can't have empathy on this level. What
Mm.
I'm saying is that certain demographics are exposed to a life that makes them hypersensitive.
I love that. And I'm just like sitting with the feeling that leaves me with, because it makes so much sense. Because she, as you were speaking, I was like, yeah, because she gets me. She gets it. And where does that come from? She gets it. And she was able to give me that culture. And I've got a picture of her back there. So that's what I'm looking at. She was able to give me that culture, and she was able to see herself in me. That's what also was coming to me when you were speaking. And I agree with that. And it makes me think of, I call it the first time I realized that I was Black. Because even though I had a Black Caribbean mother, not seeing myself reflected because we look so different. I remember me and my adopted dad used to have daddy and daughter days. And so we'd go to the beach, and we went to Brighton, which is where I live now. And I was walking down the street, and I saw a Black Barbers. I was probably about 6. And I turned and looked, and I was like, oh my goodness, they're all Black in there. And then I turned around, I looked at my adopted dad, and I was like, I'm Black too. And so they saw that. I'm sure he reported back to my mum, and they were like, okay, cool. What can we do about this? Because this can't run. Like, how do you not know your culture? They tried to implement my culture, and my mum was able to do that too. Yeah, and I can also link it back to her trauma, her understanding. So I think that's a really interesting thought. I'm going to reflect on it a bit more as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for being receptive. In the UK, what is the atmosphere around adoption? You hinted to it before, saying that people congratulate you and think that it's a great opportunity to have multiple parents, a larger family unit, all of these things. They think of it as an addition to.
Yeah.
What else can you say about the atmosphere of adoption and the conversation around it in the UK?
So it's a good question. So I would say that the cultural conversation about adoption, I think it's definitely shifted over the years, but it's not where it needs to be. So it used to be, and still can be, really secretive, and families were encouraged to keep the fact that the child was adopted secret or private. Some even kept it private and secret from their child, which is just so horrible. And I think that really goes with the culture in the UK of keeping up with the Joneses, and everything is perfect and everything is fine, and we have our perfect lawns and we're all polite. So that kind of disruption of the status quo here is not it's not well received. So we're not where we should be, but there's definitely a stronger push. And I will give credit to the amazing adoptee orgs in the UK. There's some awesome adoptees doing the work out there, and like pushing against the big charities who cater so much towards adoptive parents. So I think that push has led towards more openness to do with adoption, and people being transparent with adoptees about their origins from an early age, which is just should be a non-negotiable. Keeping connections with birth families where possible is really important. And in social care, now that is being pushed. Ideally, no child should be separated from their birth family, right? So I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but me personally, I'd like to see more support for birth families, especially Black and brown birth families, because the number of Black and brown kids in care, we're overrepresented in care, and there's such a small amount of us in the population, which is ridiculous. And so when we look at the studies, that can come down to cultural misunderstandings with social workers and Black families, and the difference in culture. For example, when I got my adoption file, my birth dad had fought really hard to keep me. He really wanted to keep me. And when I read my adoption file with the social worker, there were so many microaggressions in there. My birth dad is a tall Black guy. He is the softest, sweetest person that you will ever meet. He is so lovely. He's just like a teddy bear, but he's really tall and he's quite broad. So I guess he could be perceived as scary, but that is just the typical racism of social care. So he really didn't get on with one of my social workers. She really did not like him, even though he was there every day, coming to feed me, coming to look after me, hired a lawyer. He looked after my siblings, and he really was trying to understand how to work with the system to be able to look after me, but the system wasn't working with him. So there's a lot of racism in the UK. The history of the UK is just in all aspects is just horrific. And yes, it's changed, it's got better, but we're not where we need to be. Um, so I think the shift is happening. I do give so much credit to adoptees for that shift. It shouldn't have had to be us that push against the adoption narrative, but it's had to be. And so I think that this shift is so important because it gives us the opportunity to fully embrace our not just our identity and our biological roots and all of the things like that, but to be able to sit in our trauma, because adoption is trauma, and to fight and to try and convince and to try and prove and all of this, it takes so much energy, and that's energy that could be spent healing, that's energy that could be spent spending time in community. So that shift and that understanding needs to go further so that we can just be, because for a lot of adoptees it's difficult to just be because we're searching, we've got the developmental trauma that we suffer. So we do have in the UK, we do have now campaigns by big adoption charities who are aimed at adoptive parents, like National Adoption Week. Now, I'm iffy on National Adoption Week because it started as a campaign to push and to drive adoption, which shouldn't exist, in my opinion. However, and I do always go back to the adoptee orgs in the UK because they're amazing, and the even individual adoptee voices, we've been able to raise our voices so that we're listened to, so that there's a bit more focus on adoptee voices in these campaigns. I believe and I wish and I hope and I manifest campaigns run by adoptees that will get as big as this in the UK. But in raising our voices, we've been able to normalize the conversation around being adopted, actually have that conversation that makes people uncomfortable. And it's frustrating because it makes people who aren't adopted uncomfortable. And how do you think we feel? So we're able to have that conversation, put the focus on adoptee voices and experiences, and hopefully break the stigma that has existed before and still exists, because so many people out there, just unless they know an adoptee who speaks about their experience, they just don't know about what happens. So yeah, there's still a lot of work to do, and so many adoptees and the people that love them report feelings of isolation, and they say that post-adoption support is lacking, which it really is. So it's more talked about, it's more accepted, but we're not where we need to be at all.
I agree. We're not.
Mm.
You made some excellent points there. I think that Adoption Day, I gasp inside because we truly need to decentralize adoptive parents. That's why adoption is an industry.
Yeah.
It is a monetized $1 billion industry because the adoptive parent is at the apex. And it's about generating money. And how do you generate money? You create environments where children are displaced.
Mm.
And my heart goes out to you for what happened to your father. I'm so sorry about that. Thank you for sharing that. Because you're exactly right. She was intimidated by him just because he was of a different hue.
Yeah.
And her cultural biases got in the way of her job.
Yeah, definitely.
Which was protecting you,
Mm-hmm.
guiding him,
Yeah.
and finding an amicable way to place you in the best environment.
Yeah.
One of the greatest arguments that is wildly debunked, because if you go down the rabbit hole in individual stories, you'll find that it's easily dismantled, is the idea that these children are at the center of these conversations. They are not. You find coercion, you find microaggressions, you find manipulation always at the center of these conversations, especially if it's an interracial situation. And especially if the woman is single, if she's isolated from her family, if she doesn't have that familial or societal backing to fortify her in these moments. We hear about, for decades, women were relinquishing out of coercion for decades, for centuries.
Yeah.
And no one's talking about that, but adoptees. And we're bringing that conversation to the forefront. And I love that people are getting activated in the UK and their voices are being heard wide and far and deeply out there, because that's what's happening in the US right now. We are being activated. We are coming to the forefront of these conversations. As you said, in the UK, there isn't much support for adoptees, and all of the funding and support goes to the adoptive parent.
Yeah.
And that alone shows you that it's not a child-centered industry.
Yeah,
because family preservation should be at the apex of these models of solutions for these children. It should be the first and foremost alternative, or option rather, that people employ for these children. But it's not. It's growing. The consciousness is growing, but it's not. I just want to touch on how you came to create the Dunbar Project. I love that we got to see and hear your backstory. You've been through so much. How and what prompted you to create the Dunbar Project?
So, I was in my second year of university, so undergrad. So I was studying clinical psychology, and I faced a lot of mental distress and poor mental health, which is what led me to pursue my degree in clinical psychology and now my training as a psychotherapist, because of that thought of I can't be the only one feeling this, and it can't all be for nothing. So those are the things that I repeat to myself. So I was in my second year and I was planning my dissertation, and I was getting more involved in the conversation online around adoptees and adoption and trauma and mental health and things like that. So I set out in my dissertation initially to, I thought, okay, I'm going to prove that adoption is trauma. I started reading the literature and I was like, that's already done. There's so much literature out there. Not enough, but there's so much literature out there that states, that shows how maternal separation and adoption is trauma. So I thought, okay, cool. Don't need to do that. I focused my research on how Black UK adoptees experience mental health, being othered, being Black in the UK, in a majority white country, and being adopted in a world that doesn't understand adoption. How those two identities kind of impact on the mental health of Black adoptees. So I was doing that, and I was, I want to say, naive. I was hopeful at the time when I was looking at the bigger UK adoption organizations. I was hopeful that if I went up to them and spoke to them and said, listen, you aren't supporting adoptees, I thought they'd be like, oh, thank you, Shania. That's awesome. We're going to put this in place and we're going to listen to you. So whilst I was doing my research, I went round some of the big orgs in the UK for adoption and told them, where is the support for adoptees? So I was met with, I was shocked. I think I was naive at the time, but I was shocked. I spoke to people that were running the organization on the phone. Many of those were adoptive parents. And I just received so many answers of, oh, I'd love to pick your brain. We love our adopted child so much. We tell them this, we tell them that. And I'm thinking, you shouldn't be telling them these things, and you shouldn't be telling me these things, and you're not listening to what I've got to say. And it made me think, how come adoption is the only trauma where the person that it happens to isn't listened to? It doesn't make sense at all. Why aren't we at the center of the conversation? And I got mad. I got really mad because I'm looking at the stats, I'm looking at the mental health epidemic that we're having with adoptees, and I'm looking at these people who are so entitled and so happy and so proud of themselves, and who state that they love their children so much but aren't giving them the support that they needed. And I was like, okay, like I've got to do something. So at the time, I met my co-founder. It was during the pandemic. So we were online on an app called Clubhouse, where there was like virtual rooms with topics, and you go into the room and you talk about a topic. I think I met my co-founder in one of those rooms or on Twitter, and there were loads of adoptees from the US, but we were the only two adoptees from the UK. So we formed a bond, and we were talking about the lack of support out there for adoptees. And we were like, we've got to do something. We don't know what it is, but we've got to do something. So I put together, we thought about a name. So she thought about the name, and we started off as Adoptee Futures. And then I thought, I created a logo. I just created a logo online, and we thought about what we wanted to do. So what our aims were, how we wanted people to feel. And so we came up with the tagline, reclaim, reframe, heal. So reclaiming the adoption narrative, because at the moment it's not for adoptees. The narrative isn't ours. So reclaiming the adoption narrative, reframing the world's view on adoption through education, and helping adoptees heal. So those were the main things, and those still are the main things that we really focus on. So we were like, okay, cool, we've got this. Where do we go from here? So we did a panel event at this event called Festival of Debate. It's a festival where lots of debates go on, and we had a panel of we had two social workers, we had an adoptive parent, a birth parent, and we had adoptees. And we spoke about the myths and the truths around adoption. And it was amazing. It was such a good event. And you can find it on YouTube, Festival of Debate, the myths and the truths around adoption. And after that, we were just inundated with emails from adoptees saying, we need this, we need something, we need more of a conversation. And that's when we registered the organization as a non-profit CIC, and yeah, started doing the work. So that's what led to the creation of the Dunbar Project.
Wow, incredible. And you offer some really essential services.
Mm.
Let's talk about what you offer. You offer adoptees a variety of things. I'm bringing it up right now. Your website is so good.
I made it myself.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so clean. It's so
Thank you.
clean. Supporting transracial adoptees, UK adult adoptee movement, how to be adopted. Talk about how to be adopted, this little nugget right here.
So I think that the page that you're looking on is showcasing other adoptee orgs in the UK, which is perfect.
Oh,
I would love to give them a shout out, and you've led me into that through an amazing segue.
it was meant
So
to be.
we love to see it. It was meant to be. So we have a page on our website. I'm not sure where it is. I'm not
It's
sure where.
scroll when you scroll down on your offerings, it pops up. Yeah, you
Awesome.
have underneath your flourishing group therapy and then support groups, two very vital offerings. You have a list of other places to find support.
Mm-hmm. And so those are from the top of my memory. There's an amazing org called the Adult Adoptee Movement. Some lovely adoptees run that, and I just love them. They're so powerful, they're so fierce, they're so strong, they're fighting the good fight. They're more about like policy change and working toward an apology from the government and putting the systems in place. And I get goosebumps when I talk about it, putting the systems in place so that adoptees get the support that they need now, and in the future people are educated if they are going to raise adoptees, and for family preservation, which is vital. And then we also have How to Be Adopted, who are amazing. They're a blog, and there are so many adoptees that will write on the blog, share their experiences. So that's a vital resource. They also do retreats and they do events every now and then. So the retreats, I think, are run by a therapist. Yeah, I think, yeah, they're run by a therapist. And I think that they're yoga retreats. So really healing places for adoptees. Then we have Daughter CIC, who Daughter is run by the amazing Dion, and she's lovely, she's gorgeous. She is an artist, a musician, an actress, everything that you would want in a creative person. Dion is, yeah, Dion is, she is that girl. She has a one-woman show which is called Daughter, about her experience as an adoptee. And I'm going to tell you, the music is fire, it's awesome. You can find it on Spotify. And so she works with transracial adoptees, I want to say in Bristol, in the UK. And so she has started to do some in-person events, and she also has a podcast that she does. Oh,
Wow. Yeah, I will look them up. I've been looking them up as you've said,
definitely look
and
them
I'm
up.
incredibly inspired by them. So thank you. Thank you for highlighting and amplifying other adoptees in motion who are activated and in the trenches with us.
It's important. It's so important. It's so
In regards to your articles, because there are quite a few subjects that I'm like, which one should I highlight?
important.
Because they're all so good. Did you write all of these articles?
I
I've only
wrote
looked.
I wrote some of the articles, and then we had some amazing interns in the Easter holidays that wrote some of the articles also for us.
Okay, because I love these titles: Nurturing Healing, the Imperative of Trauma-Informed Care for
Yeah.
Adoptees. Another article, The Right to Identity, the Effects and Consequences of Restricting Adoptees' Access to Birth Records. Another being the relationship between being adopted and having children. This one resonates with a lot of people. I initially emailed you about nurturing, healing, the imperative of trauma-informed care for adoptees. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's
Why is it an imperative? What do you think?
Oh, it's so crucial. It should be, it's as vital as breathing to me, honestly. So, as adoptees, we face early attachment trauma. And so, this can lead to long-term emotional and relational difficulties. And having these relational and emotional difficulties impacts us in so many different areas of life, which is where some of the blog things come. For example, our relationship with work, our relationship with families, everything really. So, trauma informed care, caregivers and the people who love adoptees and professionals to understand how these early disruptions influence adoptees' behaviors and emotional states. And so it then fosters an environment where adoptees' feelings of either fear or insecurity or difficulties in relationships are validated rather than misunderstood as problematic behavior. So if someone has gone through a traumatic event or faces, in our case, developmental trauma, we don't want them to be, we want them to heal. We don't want them to be re-triggered. So care that is given to us adoptees needs to be trauma informed, because otherwise it raises the risk of us being re-triggered. So adoptees also, we often experience a complex interplay of loss and identity formation. And many of us feel disconnected from our biological roots. And so this can lead to struggles with identity, especially in adolescence, which is where we're trying to figure out who we are, and in adulthood. So this adoption loss can be a form of ambiguous grief where we mourn the loss of our biological connection to our family, to our identity, to our roots, to our land. And so without trauma-informed care, us as adoptees, we don't receive the proper support and access to these feelings. So that leads to heightened feelings of isolation and emotional distress. I guess we need to feel it to heal it. So if we don't understand, and if those around us don't understand, no one understands, and adoptees are just there. What is this? Why am I like this? Why is this happening? And then the blame goes inwards instead of outwards, because all children at a point in their childhood go through a phase of I don't want to call it narcissism because that's not the right word, but of thinking that the world revolves around them, and that's healthy. That's a healthy
Self-centeredness.
Thank you, thank you. Self-centeredness, and that needs to happen in childhood, because for a child to be healthy, the primary caregivers need to shower that child with love and make the child feel happy and that the world revolves around them so that they can grow and become a healthy human. So when adoption happens, when we're younger and we're in that place of everything happens is because of me, we then can internalize that blame. So this bad thing has happened. So it might be, oh, this good thing has happened. A child makes their mum smile and it feels good because they've made their mum smile and they feel good about themselves. That's what it needs to be. But when a bad thing happens, like adoption, someone leaving us, that abandonment, when we're in that state, we're like, it has to be because of me. It's my fault. And that's where the feelings of shame and the feelings of self-blame in adulthood stick with us, because what happens to us as children sticks with us. People say, oh, you were so young, you were so... No, children don't, I was going to say children don't play, but they do play. But children are so smart. Babies are so smart. Babies know what to do in order to get what they want to do. They know exactly how to cry, how to not cry, when to do this, when to do that. Babies are so sensitive to everything. So that's why it's so crucial for families to stay together and for families to be given the help and support to be able to help their children. Otherwise, like I said, it leads to those feelings of shame, isolation, emotional distress. So trauma-informed approaches really emphasize and recognize the layers of loss and grief and provide adoptees with therapeutic strategies, basically, to be able to address the grief, identity, and belonging.
That's so important. I was adopted when I was 4 as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a scientific fact that the ages between 0 and 7 are the most impressionable ages of your life. You're learning more than you'll ever learn in your life in those years. You're learning language, how to walk, how to speak, how to move. You're learning cultural norms.
Yeah.
You're learning names and absorbing so much in those years.
Mm.
And not only that, the body keeps score. We hold our trauma in our tissue and bone. It comes up in disease. It comes up in injuries. It comes up in chronic pain in your back or in your arm, in your knees. This is a scientific fact.
Yeah.
And for people to think that adoptees can just get over it is glib, ignorant, and completely untrue, as well as insensitive, because who is anyone to tell you to get over something, right? They have no right.
Yeah.
So I love what you had to say about that. I think that you speak so beautifully about your vision for Dunbar Project and what it's doing in the world and representing in such a gorgeous way. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm inspired by you truly. what else is next for you? Where can we find you, and what events do you want us to look out for?
So at the moment, what we provide is regular support groups, somatic and analytic group therapy, community projects. So we're a community-led organization to the best of our ability. So we listen to what the community wants and try to put that into practice. Webinars and learning, so psychologically informed learning, because we believe that in order to heal, we need to understand. So that's why the majority of our work is based on psychological theories. So you can find us on the web at www.thedunbarproject.org.uk. You can also find us on Instagram at the Dunbar Project and on Facebook at the Dunbar Project. We also have Twitter, which is Project Dunbar. We are currently in the process of creating a adoptee poetry zine, which was requested by the community. And that's part of our kind of healing through enjoyment. That's our vibe, really. We have the psychological part of it and we have the education and understanding, but sometimes healing is so exhausting. So sometimes you just need to have fun to heal your inner child. So sometimes we do pajama parties, we do like cooking sessions, like just anything that just feels good for our inner child. So that's what the poetry zine is going to be about. And then once I finish studying, I'm hoping to provide more therapeutic support, which is so needed, adoptee therapists in the UK. So yeah, that's where you can find us, and that's what we're up to.
They're needed in the US as well. Adoptee therapist is a game changer. I found one last year who's
Okay.
Black, adoptee, and also interracial, like myself.
Uh,
And so she just gets it. I don't have to explain myself in ways in which I bend into a pretzel. She
yeah.
just gets it. And I love that.
Yeah.
For people like me who are on this side of the pond or somewhere else in the world, how can we engage with you? Can we still engage
Yeah.
in these projects? Are they mostly online or in person?
Yeah, so our support groups are mostly online. You can find us through our social media. We're also on Eventbrite. That's how you can book. As long as the time works for you. It's usually in the evening about 7 to 7:30 p.m. UK time. So everyone is welcome and everyone is welcome to join in the poetry project as well. The only things that are difficult is if we put things on in person, but hey, if people are willing to fly over, we will accept you with open arms. You don't have the budget to pay for flights. If I won the lottery, I would listen. I would be flying everyone everywhere. But yeah, we welcome everyone with open arms. Our three, so we have three healing communities. We have at the moment all adoptees, Black adoptees, and queer adoptees. And so it's really important for me to have more than one because of multiple minority trauma. But it's also really important for me that the people who are in the positions of power, so leading the workshops, are of that minoritized group. So that's why I haven't yet put on groups for other minorities, because I think it would be wrong of me to like step in as a facilitator. So yeah, so we welcome everyone.
You are such a hero. You are such a
Thank you.
beastly visionary. I love it. I
Thank
love
you.
it. Yeah, I'm truly inspired by you and what it is that you're doing and how you're connecting in your community. I'm thinking of ways like, how can I just get launched in Chicago? Like in my small little neck of the woods, how can I activate it? And so thank you for that. Thank you for planting the seed in me to get started on certain projects and to be bold and brave about it, because that's exactly what you're doing. It's been wonderful chatting with you, Shania.
It's been so lovely chatting with you, and thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing in highlighting adoptees' voices. I acknowledge how tough and hard it can be to talk about these things, but it's so empowering what you're doing and creating a resource where people can just on the go listen and like connect with community, because community is the way forward. So thank you so much for having me on. And if I'm ever in Chicago, I will hit you up. We will go for brunch.
Come through.